Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are going to study together Nehemiah, that's Nehemiah chapter 9. We had just read in the last chapter about how the people gathered on the first day of Tishrei on Rosh Hashanah. They gathered with Ezra, leading them, teaching them the Torah, reading them the Torah, and the reaction of the people, the initial reaction was overwhelming sorrow and sadness that they had not been keeping the Torah properly. However, Ezra and all of the other people who were teaching the Torah to the nation reminded them that this is a holiday, this is time for celebration, and then they celebrated Sukkot together. We read about how the beautiful verses about how they celebrated Sukkot, and Ezra read the Torah every day, and the people were learning more and more and more and celebrating the holiday of Shmini Atzeret. After all of those holidays are over, that they end on the Shmini Atzeret is the 23rd day of the month of Tishrei. So on the 24th day, now the people returned to the mood that they started with. The mood that how can we rectify all of these mistakes and problems and lack of knowledge, lack of experience, lack of any knowledge of the Torah of God. And they returned to the sadness that they had started with before they celebrated the holidays together. Then on the 24th day, this is the first verse, on the 24th day of this month of Tishrei, the same month, Nesvu v'nei Yisrael, then the people gathered together, b'tzom u'v'sakim, in fasting and in sackcloth, v'adam aleim, with earth on them. This was the way people would mourn and express their sadness. Because now that the holidays are over, they're back to the very depressed mood of people that were missing so much, and so much time was lost, so much worship and service of God was lost. If you recall, and we're about to learn the next verse, and this is going to be an important theme in this chapter. Nehemiah, when he was bragging in not bragging, that's the wrong word, I'm sorry. When Nehemiah was telling God, and in verse 5, talking of his own virtues, he was talking then and asking God for help with the people. He said, I was transparent, I was honest, I was good, I invited people to my home to eat. Nehemiah made it a point to express, and all of the people from the nations around us that wanted to join us, I welcomed them with open arms and fed them at my table. And most of the commentaries understand that to mean the welcoming in of converts from the other nations of the land. We learned this in Ezra as well, how when the people brought the first Korban Pesach, the first Paschal Lamb, on the first Passover celebrated, again, as Ezra emphasized how the people that had separated themselves from the ways of the nations that wanted to join the people were invited with open arms to join and convert to Judaism. These were the Gerim, the converts that we discussed. However, at the same time, the people were also intermarrying with many people who were not willing to separate themselves from those bad ways and not willing to separate themselves from the idolatrous ways. And those people, they needed to separate from them because they were a very bad influence. And in the marriages, we discussed in Ezra how some marriages needed to be broken up. So, Vayibadlu Zera Yisrael, this is verse 2, the children of Israel, those that were faithful, Mikol B'nei Nechar, they separated themselves from all of those who were children of strange gods. Vayamdu Vayisfadu al Chatoseim, and they stood up and they confessed their sins before God, Va'avonos Avoseim, and they confessed the sins of their forefathers. This does not mean, of course, that a son can do tshuva, can repent for their forefathers, but they confessed before God. Look at us, look at the fact that we come from families that for generations have been lost, generations have been misinformed, generations have not lived the way we were supposed to live. Vayakumu alamdam, and standing in their places, vayikru, and they continued to read b'sefer Torat Adonai Elohim Revi'et Hayom, for a quarter of the day. I guess that's 3 hours into the day, they read the Torah, the Revi'et Misvadim, and then another quarter of the day they were confessing, mishtachavim, and bowing Adonai Elohim, to the Lord their God. Vayakom al male halavim, and on the raised platform which the Levites used when they led the people, when they sang, when they led the people in prayer and led the people in learning Torah, there was a raised wooden platform. This may be the same platform that Ezra used to read the Torah, maybe a different one. The following people stood up: Yeshua, Uvani, Kadmiel, Shevanya, Buni, Sherevia, Bani, Chinani. Those were the people who stood up. Vayizaku b'kol gadol, and they cried out in a loud voice of Adonai Elohim to the Lord their God. Vayomru haLeviim, and these Leviim, many of these are the same names as the people listed before. So some of them were the same, some of them were different. Yeshua, V'Kadmiel, Bani, Chashavnia, Sherevia, Hodia, Shevanya, Pesachia. These of the Levites, they said, Kumu Baruchu et Adonai Elohechem, get up, stand up, and give praise to the Lord your God, Mina Olam ad Olam, from this world until the next world. The echoes of this sentence, we say it every day in the prayer services, are designed this way, to get up and say Baruchu es Hashem HaMevorach. This is where it comes from. This is where we learn this from. Vayivarchu Shem Kvodecha, and then the people responded with, just like we do today, we respond by blessing God. Vivarchu Shem Kvodecha, I'm sorry, this is not the response. This is the Levim, the Levites, still stating, and you in plural should bless your, meaning God's, great honorable name, umiromam, your name which is exalted, al kol bracha ustehila, over any blessing or praise. In other words, we're praising you, we're blessing you, God, but we're also acknowledging that none of our praise could possibly be sufficient for your praise. Atahu Adonai levadecha, you are alone, God. You are singular. You are there. This is the recognition of the unity of God, of the oneness. This is the basis of monotheism being stated here out loud and clear. There is nothing like you. Atah asiso es hashamayim. You are the one who created the heavens, shemei hashamayim, and the heavens of the heavens, v'chol tzivam, and all of the hosts. In other words, all of the stars and all of the heavenly bodies, and everything that exists, every power in the world, you are the creator of it. Haaretz, you also created the land, not just the heavens, but this planet Earth. V'chol asher aleh, and everything that is upon earth. Hayamim, the seas, v'chol asher b'hem, the seas, and all of the myriads of creatures that live within the seas. V'ata mechayes kulam, and you give life to all of them. Utzuvah hashamayim l'chomish tachavim. Even the hosts of the heavens, the stars and the constellations and the galaxies, they bow to you. They are nothing before you. These are in times when they thought that these heavenly bodies had powers, but now we know even more. They're extremely powerful, even more powerful than anyone in those days could possibly have imagined, more than we can even imagine. And we realize that these powers are only derived from their creator God. Atohu Adonai Elohim, you are the Lord God. You are God, Adonai, meaning you are, that's your name, God, and Elohim, you are the God. Asher bacharta bi Avram, you chose the special person whose name was Avram. This is Abraham's name before it was changed. V'hotzeitom Ur Kasdim, and you brought him out of Ur Kasdim, from the place where he started his career, where he was born and raised and grew up, and you brought him out from that place when you told him to travel to Israel, v'samta shemo Avraham, and you made his name Avraham. And they're pointing this out. This is a review of history, starting with creation of the world, turning to God, mentioning God's greatness first by talking about how he created the entire world, and then how the chosen people came about, starting with Abram, who challenged him by asking him to leave Ur Kasdim, to leave the place of his birth. You changed his name and said, because you are special to me, Avraham, you will be the father of all nations, Avraham. These words are, of course, very familiar to us from the Siddur, from the Shacharit prayer, from the morning prayer. Every morning we say these words. You have found Abraham's heart trustworthy before you, this is the defining understanding of why the chosen people were the chosen people. Because Abraham was trustworthy before you. It was because Abraham demonstrated that he was special. Avraham demonstrated his trust, his faith in you, starting with leaving Ur Kasdim, and then by fulfilling the tasks that God put before him. Abraham demonstrated his faithfulness, and therefore God chose him. This is a clear argument for the rationalistic Maimonidean understanding of the origins of the chosen people, that began not because there's something innately different about the soul of Abraham and his descendants, but rather because Abraham made that choice to recognize God and made that choice to be Ne'eman Lefanecha, which is why God, Asher B'charta B'Avram, that's why you, God, chose him. V'charosi Mo'abris, and after choosing him, you made a covenant with him, L'seis et Zeres HaKnaani, to give him the land in which the Canaanim, the Canaanites live, also the Hittites, the Amori, the Amorites, the Aprizi and the Perizzites, the Hayavusi and the Jebusites, the Girgashi and the Girgashites that lived in that land. L'seis Lazaro, you made a covenant with Abraham that you would give that land to his descendants. Vatokem mistevarecha, and you have fulfilled your words. Here we are, the people back. Ki tzadik atah, because you are righteous, you are just. God, you fulfill your promises, and you do. And you'll see after we read this speech and review of history that the people are giving now on this day, that their understanding of this bris, this understanding of this covenant, and what God agreed to give the people this land, and he did, and the people will get there. I don't know about this podcast, I think the next one, what they agreed to do back for God. They continue their review of history, moving on from Abraham to Egypt. You saw the suffering of our forefathers when they were in Egypt. And then in other words, you saw their poverty, you saw their suffering, and you redeemed them. Filling in the blanks. And then your cries you heard al Yamsuf when they were at the Sea of Reeds, when they were at the Red Sea, and they were about to be attacked and killed by the Egyptians. You listened to them. And how did you save them? Verse 10, and you made signs and wondrous deeds, incredible miracles and signs that Befaro, against Pharaoh, and all of his servants, against his entire nation, his entire population. They all saw the wondrous miracles that you performed against them. Ki yadata, because you knew, ki hezidu alehem, that they had treated them, meaning the Egyptians had treated them, Abraham's descendants, the Jewish people, the Israelites, they had treated them in an improper way. In other words, the os and the mofes, what was the sign and the wonder? Was that they were punished because you, God, know, you, God, understand. This is one of the key and essential components of the basis of Judaism, and that is that God knows and understands true justice and metes out justice because he understands and he knows that which the Egyptians had done to the people of Israel was Hezidu, was unjust, was unrighteous, was cruel. And in this way, by acting justly, and people should see that you act in such a way, you made yourself a reputation that endures to this day. I like that translation. I've seen it in places that endures to this day because people know and look at God as the source of justice. And what did you do? What was this thing? You split the sea in front of them. And your people went through the midst of the sea. They walked on dry land. However, those that were their pursuers, you threw into the depths, like a stone falls into raging waters. A stone, no matter how much the waters are rocking around, the stone still sinks to the bottom, and that's what happened. That concludes the portion that we read every morning, but the people continued to speak, and this was at the time after they had learned the Torah together, they had studied the Torah. Now they're internalizing this, internalizing the messages, the key messages that the Torah teaches. V'amud anan hinchitam yomam, and with a pillar of cloud you led them through the wilderness in the daytime. V'amud eish laila, and a pillar of flame you led them through the wilderness at night. L'ha'ir lehem, to light for them, es haderech asher yelchu ba, the proper way for them to go. V'al har Sinai yoradeta, and then they move on to Har Sinai. They move on to the Mount Sinai, and then you came down to this earth. You were presence, God, so to speak, to the extent that we can understand such things. You came down to Har Sinai, v'daberi mohem mishamayim, and you spoke to them. They heard your words speaking to them from heaven. V'titein lahem mishpatim yisharim v'torot emes. And what did you give to them? You didn't command them to give to do bad things, to do things in God's name, to do violence, but no, you gave them mishpatim yisharim, laws that are just, v'torot emes, and teachings that are true, chukim u'mitzvot tovim, laws and commandments that are good, that are meant to help, that are meant to be good. V'at Shabbat kachucha, and they choose which law do they specifically single out first. That is probably the most important of the mitzvot, one of the 10 commandments, of course, and the one which is the bedrock of Jewish life, and that is Shabbat kachucha, your holy Shabbat, hodato lehem, you let them know, you told them this is a Shabbat, this is what you're supposed to celebrate, and this is how. Mitzvot v'chukim v'torah, and other commandments, of course, too, you gave them, and other laws, and other teachings, tzivitza lehem, you commanded them, biyad Moshe avdecha, through whom? Through Moshe, Moses, your servant. V'lechem mishamayim natato lehem lir'avam, and you gave them bread from the heavens, the man or the manna, mayim sela hotzeita lehem litzma'am, and water you brought out from a rock in order to satisfy their thirst. V'tomer lehem, and you told them lavo l'reshet ha'aretz, that it is their job to come and inherit the land asher nasasa es yad kol haseis lehem, that you had sworn to give them. This is a fascinating little piece here, and that is that the people understood that God made a promise to give them the land, but in the same sentence, v'tomer lehem lavo, that you should come l'reshet ha'aretz. They understood that God made them a promise, but it's part of this covenant. It's part of an agreement, which the people have to do their part, which was they have to conquer the land. Which is not only, and here you would think that they're referring to conquering the land militarily, which to some extent is the case, but it's not really the case, as we're about to see in the next verse. How is it that the people were supposed to inherit the land? By keeping the mitzvot and the Torah and the Shabbat and the things that we just mentioned in the last verse. Because that's why in the next verse the people continue to say, Vehem va'avosenu hezidu. What did the people do? They acted hezidu. They acted criminally. They acted unjustly. Now, it's very important that they choose to use the same term to describe the people who came into the land of Israel, the people of Judah, their ancestors, as they described the way the Egyptians treated the Jewish people when they were in Egypt. They used the same language of hezidu. Now, this is incredible if you think about it. This is incredible because what they're trying to say is that you freed them from Egypt in a just manner, because the Egyptians were evil, the Egyptians were corrupt, and when they came and they set their own land, they made it corrupt themselves. And this goes back to Nehemiah 5. If you look back a couple chapters ago, we read when Nehemiah said to the people that were enslaving their brothers by making them indebted and demanding repayment at high interest rates and so on, Nehemiah said to them that this is why God redeemed you from slavery. We were enslaved when we were in exile. Did we come back in order to go and enslave our own brothers? This is echoing. Now the people recognize here in chapter 9, this themselves, they recognize that this is what we did wrong. We started acting like the Egyptians. Not because we started treating our own brethren, our own neighbors, the same way that we were treated when we were slaves, the way the rich enslaved the poor. This is Nehemiah This is the teaching that Nehemiah tried to teach them back then. They finally took it to heart. Vayakshu et arpam, and what did they do? They were hezidu. They acted contemptuously. They acted evil towards their brothers, and they became stubborn. V'lo shamu el mitzosecha. They did not listen to your mitzvot. Vayimo'anu lishmoa, and they refused to listen. V'lo zachru niflosecha asher asisa imohem. They forgot about all of those great wonders that you had done with them and the lesson of justice that you tried to teach them. Vayakshu et arpam. They were stubborn. Vayitnu rosh lashuv la'avdu sam b'Miriam. And they went ahead and they decided that they were going to return back to their slavery in their rebelliousness. This is number one in reference to how the people said when they were in the desert, let's just go back to Egypt. And whenever they were complaining, they used to say that. But this also means they were going to go back to their slavery. In other words, they never got the slavery mentality out of themselves. They never understood that they were free and they're supposed to be subservient to God and God only. And they continued this pattern of people slaving each other. And you, the God of forgiveness, you are the God of forgiveness. Chanun v'racham, you are merciful and you are kind. Erech apayim, you are patient. V'rav chesed, you are full of kindness. V'lo azavtam, and you did not abandon them despite their behavior. Even when they went and they made a golden calf, a calf made out of melted metal, and they spit in your face by saying, "This is your God." Asher helcha miMitzrayim. They pointed to each other and said, "Look, fellow Jews, this is your God that took you out of Egypt." And they did such terrible ne'atzot. Ne'atzot is bad things someone does to someone else, like you poke and stick it in their face. You did. That's what they did to God. And you, in your great mercy, lo azabtam b'midbar, you did not abandon them in the desert, even though one might think you should have. Et amun hanon lo sarmi aleim, you did not take away the pillar of cloud biyomam in the day lanchos ba'derech, to show them the road. Ve'tamut eish b'layla la'arlem, you did not take away the pillar of fire at nighttime to give them light. Ve'taderech asher yelchu ba, and to show them the way that they should go upon. Baruch, I think because this is a long chapter, I think this is a good. There isn't really a great stopping point because it all continues, but I think that at this point, and we just finished verse 19. So this will be Nehemiah 9a, and we'll finish chapter 9 when we do Nehemiah 9b together. Thank you so much for studying this together. Looking forward to studying 9b, finishing this chapter, and of course the whole wonderful book of Nehemiah together.